Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pri Raja Kacharya Stirtha Satta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pri Raja Kacharya Stirtha Satta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Gangamai Jamnumai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinama Sankirtana Ki Jai. Iskcon Alachua Yatra Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So today we're reading from Canto 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter number 6, entitled Creation of the Universal Form, text numbers 11 through 13. Atha tasya abhitaptasya atatasya abhitasya atatasya abhitaptasya katidha ayatanani ha katidhayatanani ha nirabhidyanta devanam nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadataha shinu tani me gadatak shinu atatasya bhitaptasya katidayatnaniha nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadatak shinu atatasya bhitaptasya katidayatnaniha nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadatak shinu. Nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadatakshinu atatasya bhitaptasya katidayatnaniha 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 nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gadatakshinu. Ata, therefore, tasya, his, abhitaptasya, in terms of his contemplation, katidha, how many, ayatanani, embodiments, there were, nirabhidyanta, by separated parts, devanam, of the demigods, tani, all those, me gadataha, described by me, shinu, just here. Translation. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." Please repeat. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the posts of demigods who are entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs. Let's go on and read the next two verses and purport. Tasyagnir asyam nirbhinnam lokapalo vishatvatam vacha svangshena vaktavyam yasyasa pratipadyate. Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is the controlling deity, or the Adhidaiva. The speeches delivered are adhyatma, or bodily functions, and the subject matter of the speeches is material productions, or the adhibhuta principle. Text 13. Nirbhinnang talu varuno lokapalo vishadbharahe jiva yangshena charasang yasyasa pratipadyate. When the palate of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of air in the planetary system, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. Om Ajnanatmarandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Miditang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So after discussing the universal form, lie down within we're continuing with creation now. Maitreya is going to talk about the different demigods. or some of the different demigods, how the Lord separated himself into diverse forms of demigods after manifestation of the gigantic universal form. So, universal form is like an external form of Krishna. The universe is created from time to time and then destroyed. So it's temporary. It's being created again and again, bhutva bhutva praliyate, where there's the eternal transcendental world in Krishna's internal potency, which is always manifest, or it's unmanifest, but it's always existing in transcendence, where Krishna is eternally enjoying bhakti rasa, devotional service with unlimited different devotees, different of his energies. And then from time to time this material creation appears, and the technique of meditating on the universal form of this giant material creation as a form of the personality of Godhead is recommended for neophyte devotees like myself. It's actually purifying. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the Mahatmas, the pure devotees, who are always meditating on the transcendental spiritual forms of Krishna, always chanting his glories and bowing down to him. Satatang kirtayanto mang yatantascha judhavitaha namashantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. And then he talks about others who are not the Mahatmas, that they worship him through the sacrifice of knowledge, as ekat bena pratak bena bahudha vishvato mukham. So they're worshipping him as the one without a second, the diverse in many, or as the universal form. So these are not the pure devotees. Srila Prabhupada says of the three, those who worship as one with themselves are the lowest, actually. But these are different ways of trying to approach Krishna, but not approaching his transcendental spiritual forms. So, but one way that we can, because we're here in this material world, we see the world around us. We may not have strong faith in the transcendental form of Krishna, but we may have faith in the world we see around us, the forms and things around us. So we know there's a universe that we're in, and we can imagine that gigantic universe is there. Well, what is it? What is its form? What is this thing? So it's helpful to understand that this is actually a manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, everything is a manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our problem is that we don't see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We don't understand him. We don't understand his transcendental form. So we can have to learn through this meditation on his universal form. We can imagine that the giant sky above us is like his eye socket, and the sun and the moon are like his eyes, and the big mountain ranges are like the stacks of his bones, and the trees that we see all over the surface of the earth are like the hairs on his body, and the rivers are like his veins, and so forth. And we can, it's actually helpful for us to think that way, and it help us have faith in the personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the truth is that this is an external form. It's temporary, it's manifested and unmanifested. It's the material manifestation which he creates for a particular purpose. And so the higher devotees, the very advanced devotees who can always see his transcendental form within their hearts of hearts, with their eyes smeared, tinged with the salve of love, they don't need so much to meditate on this gigantic universe as his form. When Arjuna wanted to see the universal form, actually for our benefit, he wanted to see the universal form, and then he was satisfied, but he wasn't happy seeing the form that Krishna showed him was very frightening, and he saw all the soldiers on the battlefield being devoured in these flaming mouths of this gigantic form with gigantic shining eyes and big weapons upraised that could hardly be looked at. And he lost his composure, and he asked Krishna to again return to his form as Krishna, his four-handed form, and then again into his beautiful two-handed form. So some time ago, a couple months ago, I suppose, I was mentioning this Adidaiva, Adhyatma, and Adibhuta. I think Ragatmika asked me after class, where is this found? Where is it discussed? So I mentioned it's discussed in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 7 and chapter 8. It's discussed in chapter 10 of the second canto, and it's being discussed here as well. That we've all heard that there's threefold miseries. Adibhotik klesha, miseries that come from other living beings. Adidaiva klesha, things that come from natural occurrences, the demigods, the superior controllers. And adhyatma, from our own body and mind. So these three terms can be used in slightly different ways. In Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 7, Krishna says, Jara marana mokshaya mama shruti yatanti ye te brahma tadvidu kritsnam adhyatma karma chakilam. There, the word adhyatma is translated, Srila Prabhupada says, adhyatma karma chakilam, that they entirely understand transcendental activities. Adhyatma is being used as transcendental. But the word atma means self, and that self can be understood to be the actual spiritual self, which is Brahman, which is transcendental, but also in our material conditioned soul, as conditioned souls, we identify with material body and mind, and sometimes the word atma can refer to those two. So when we're dividing the world into adhyatma, adibhotik, and adidaivik, the senses and mind are also considered adhyatmic because they're considered like the perceiving self, even of the conditioned souls in the material world. They're, that which pertains to the perceiver is adhyatmic. Adibhotik is that which is perceived. The gross material elements and the sense objects are considered adibhotik. That is, the study of the physical world is the study of the creation, adibhuta. And adidaivik refers ultimately to God, the super soul, but also to the demigods who we see here. They're not actually God. They're parts of Krishna's gigantic universal body, but they're not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because of their pious activities and their absence of this so much false ego, not that they're free completely from false ego, some of them are pure devotees, some of them aren't, but they're not so much as us, desiring to lord it over material things, then Krishna gives them the position of controllers in this material world. And so they're the Adidaivik. And in the next verse in chapter 7, Krishna says, Sadhibhuta Adidaivang mang sadhiyagyang cha yevidahu prayana kale pichamam te vidur yukta chetasaha. That those who know me as the Adidaivik and the Adibhutik, and also as the Lord of Sacrifice, who dwells in the body, they can understand and know me even at the time of death. So then at the very next verse, the beginning of the 8th chapter, Arjuna asks these questions. What is karma? What is the adhyatma? What is the adibhuta? What is the adidaiva? How can those, what is the adijagya? Where does he live in the body? And how can those who, how can people actually know you even at the time of death? And Krishna begins answering those questions. And much of the chapter refers to attaining the Supreme is the title of the chapter, refers to how one can know Krishna at the time of death and get beyond this material world which is constantly being created and destroyed and enter into the transcendence. But at the beginning he says that, that the nature of Atma, Adhyatma, is Brahman, and the nature of Adibhuta is Ksharo, that it's constantly changing, that it's temporary and it's constantly changing and falling. And let's see, Adibhuta Ksharo Bhava Purushashchadi Daivatam. So the nature of the Adidaivik is to be the Purusha, or the personal controller. So he begins answering those questions in that way. So in the 10th chapter, the 2nd canto, we understand that these three features of the material world, the Adibhotik, Adidaivik, and Adhyatmic, are interdependent. And one can't understand one without the others. They're all required. in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about how in the beginning of creation, different sacrifices were sent forth, different generations of men and demigods, and he says, Devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantu vaha parasparang bhavayantak shreya paramavapsita. That there's a cooperation, that the necessities of our life as human beings, the sun, the rain, the air, these things are provided by the demigods, but the demigods are also more or less dependent for their happiness and distress upon the performance of yajna, the offering of different materials in sacrifice by human beings. So there's this cooperation. Our senses don't work without the controllers of those senses, who that task has been entrusted to various demigods. And so in this way, and what do the senses perceive then? They perceive material stuff, which is adipoti. So these three things, there's an interdependence of these three things that is required for complete understanding. The complete understanding is that Krishna is all these things. When we say Krishna is the Adhyatma, we don't mean that we're identical with Krishna in every respect. Krishna is the Paramatma. He's the soul of our soul. He's our inner... To be identical with Krishna for a devotee is that our desires are to only satisfy Krishna's desires. He's our heart and soul. He's our life and soul. He's the only thing we live for. It's not like the Mayavadis, who think that they've become Krishna and therefore they don't really care about serving Krishna or worshipping Krishna. The demigods are representatives of Krishna. He's the ultimate controller. Maya Dhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetanani Kanteya Jagabhibharavartate. So the demigods are acting under his direction. They're representing him, the super soul. And he's the beneficiary of all sacrifices, as explained in Adi Yajna. And the material ingredients, the material elements are also coming from Krishna. They're his external energy, and they're manifestations of Krishna. So we should come to understand that Krishna is really everything, but not in the way that the Mayavadis say, like, Krishna is everything there, so why should I bother worshipping Krishna, or why should I go to the temple? But we should understand Krishna. That's in the 9th chapter, Krishna is saying that he's saying that others, the not Mahatmas, they perform these sacrifices of knowledge, and they perceive me as the universal form, or as the pantheistic conception that any demigod you imagine, or 5 particular demigods that you worship, are the supreme, or the conception of the impersonal Brahman as being the supreme, that they don't really know Krishna himself. So he's saying then, but it is I who am the sacrifice, I am the fire, I am the butter, I am the healing herb, and I am all these different things. I am the enjoyer of all the sacrifices. Those who don't me, tat beinatas, then they fall down. If you worship the demigods without understanding their connection to me, or you don't worship me, you worship the demigods, then you go to the planets of the demigods, but only if you worship me, you come to me. So here, first he's talking about the mouth of the universal form. In chapter 10 of the 2nd canto, it says that when the universal form began to feel hunger, then his mouth developed. And then from his mouth was Agni, the demigod in control of fire. Fire is the mouth of Vishnu. When we offer sacrifices, we offer it into the fire, which is Krishna's mouth, or Vishnu's mouth. And from the mouth from this fire is the speaking, speaking faculty. By speaking, things get done. So the directors of material manifestation, where does it say? We were just reading that. The directors of material affairs entered into this Agni in their respective positions. So that's by speaking. What do managers do? Often maybe too much. They sit and have meetings and they make plans and then they go out and send people out to implement the plans. But this speaking and planning is important in directing affairs. And then the palette of the form was manifested. Surprising here, it says Varuna is the director of air in the planetary systems, because usually I hear of Varuna as the director of water, but in this verse it says he's the director of air. Let's see what the Lokapala. Yeah, in the verse, in the word for word, it says Varuna, the deity controlling water. We didn't do the word for this, but Nirbhinam, separated, Talu, palette, Varunaha, the deity controlling water, Lokapalaha, director of the planets, Avishat, entered, Harehe, of the Lord, Jivaya Angshena, with the part of the tongue, Cha, also, Rasam, tastes, Yaya, by which Asao, the living entity, Pratipadyate, expresses. So at least in the word for word, we see Varuna as the controller of water. Somehow in the translation it says he's the director of air. But at any rate, as we discussed earlier, water is associated with taste. Earth is associated with odor or fragrance, just like all the beautiful flowers and fruits and things come out of the earth with all their different fragrances. And air is associated with touch, fire with form, and ether with sound. So the tasting facility is associated with the demigod in control of water, Varuna. And so we can see in this way that the gigantic universal form, we're like the homunculus. You know, we're talking about the creation of the universe with all the elements. So the elements are there. You know, there's a sense of sight is an element. Now we tend to think of how can a sense of sight be separated from, you know, a person that sees. But at first they're created as separate entities and then they become manifest in their state of cooperation by virtue of the universal form coming into or before he comes in and animates the universe, it doesn't happen that way. So these senses actually exist as separate entities, but the universal form is just like we're going and doing things. All the different living entities have senses and they have activities and they have conceptions and so forth. So we're part of this big, gigantic, what did they say? Like they say, I'm forgetting the word now, but there's a word for there's a small and then there's the entire thing. Maybe it'll come back to me. But there's a, I'm forgetting. But anyway, the universe has its own senses. The universe has its own mind. The universe has its own sense of taste. In fact, we wouldn't have a sense of taste without the universe's sense of taste. And the demigods that control taste are representing or are arising from the universe's own different bodily parts and senses. So that's being described in this section of chapter 6. So maybe we can have some discussion at this point and maybe go back to some further things if we need to. Oh, I was thinking of I still can't think of the word. Cosmic, there's the small and then the big. Macro, micro? No. But there's a word for it. Macrocosm and microcosm. Oh, there you go. I think that's what I was thinking of. All right, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Prabhu. If I'm not mistaken, I heard you say that the demigods are dependent on yajna for happiness and distress.
Yes.
What's the distress part?
Well,
they're dependent on yajna for distress.
Indra became distressed when the sacrifice wasn't being done for him, right? But if we do the sacrifice for Krishna, then it satisfies the demigods like watering the root of the tree. But sacrifice has to be done or demigods feel distress, actually. It says that if we have, do I have a Gita here? I think it's a direct quote from chapter 3, verse, what is it, 11? That's 7, or 9, that's 9. But I'm thinking of Devan Bhavayatanina, 3:11. So, the demigods are empowered administrators of material affairs. The supply of air, light, water, and all other benedictions for maintaining the body and soul of every living entity is entrusted to the demigods, who are innumerable assistants in different parts of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their pleasures and displeasures are dependent on the performance of yagyas by the human being. Some of the yagyas are meant to satisfy particular demigods, but even in doing so, Lord Vishnu is worshipped in all yagyas as the chief beneficiary. So they feel displeasure when the yagyas are stopped or the yagyas aren't happening, because they require that somehow. Okay. It's hard for us to conceive these great controllers. What do they need from us? But we're all interdependent in that way. The world is created that way. Controller, you need somebody to control, somebody to say, that I'm going to follow you and obey you. But important point for devotees is we don't have to worship we don't separately worship demigods. We're Vaishnavas by worshiping the Supreme Lord, who's supposed to be worshipped in every sacrifice, even for sacrifices meant for individual demigods. He's the supreme beneficiary. But if we actually perform sacrifice, we satisfy all the demigods automatically. They're even more satisfied because we're doing it correctly, we're doing it right. And the sacrifice for this age is Harinam Sankirtan, a transcendental book distribution, the Sankirtan movement of glorifying Lord Chaitanya, Lord Krishna through congregational chanting. Hare Krishna.
Also, I was always under the impression that they become the demigods. They are in that position because they have this inclination to lord it over and to, be the controller of something at least. So, but you're saying some are pure devotees and some aren't. So, but they're significantly free from that propensity.
Yes, we have that propensity too.
Yes,
but. We notice it in them because they're being given the responsibility to control things. But we also, in the material world, we become little controllers. People become controllers in their own families or their own businesses or whatever, because we have that propensity strongly. But if we know how to properly use that propensity by not being too attached to it and everything, we can get into a higher position or better position to. Otherwise, if, as we see in this day and age, in Kali Yuga, if you give an unqualified person a position of extreme power, they're going to misuse it and cause havoc. So to actually be a proper controller, you have to be somewhat free of that propensity. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned that in the purport today of text 11, that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the posts of demigods, who are entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs. So certain demigods like Yamaraj or Durga, they are pure devotees, they have no separate desire, and they're carrying out the Lord's. And all the demigods we can consider they're advanced devotees. And these, if we read like Brihat Bhagavatamrita, and there's comparisons of different demigods to other devotees, and they're comparing devotional service, that's rasology going on there also. There's an explanation of the higher qualities of devotional service in terms of, in terms of the different rasas of devotional service. But we can think of the demigods as much higher than us in terms of their devotional service.
And one last question. In the 10th canto, Mother Yasoda is praying for protection of Krishna. And there's a whole litany of protecting all the parts of his body. Is she addressing demigods there, or are they just other names of Krishna? Do you recall? I know Sukada could answer this because she prays that.
I don't recall that specific passage, so Sukada is not here. Someone else want to answer that specifically, what she's referring to what she's, I don't know the prayers.
May Maniman protect your back or something, in your front and your eyes and your mind and your feet, legs, you know. I don't know.
So they may be different names of Vishnu, or they may be different demigods. Okay. But the demigods represent Vishnu, but we should know the difference. Yeah. Madhumati had a question, I think.
Thank you, Prabhu. So the demigods, you were talking about taste and smell, and they're in charge. So the fact that nowadays we see in the fruits and the flowers and everything, at least in the West, still in India, there's a lot of fragrance and taste in the fruits, but not here. Is it because the demigods are holding back now because of what we do? Are they holding back, or is the universal form where they get their powers from is being held by the universal form? Do you have any idea what's
I don't know. It may be impious activities. You know, like flowers, like roses and things, they actually breathe the fragrance out of them on purpose because people are allergic to it, or people don't like the smell, or whatever. It's backwards. It's Kali Yuga. You know, of course, you want a rose that has a nice fragrance to offer to Krishna, but they don't understand the purpose is to offer to Krishna, so they breed it out. And then they have turned everything into a business, and they try to monetize everything. So there are ways to pick fruits before they're ripe, and then, you know, treat them so that they will ripen. They put dyes on the color of all the fruits and things like that. And that may be, you could still get some good tomatoes somewhere. You could still get a good orange that is very fragrant. But why is this happening that we have, you know, strawberries that don't taste like strawberries anymore, or whatever? Yeah, you could say it's due to lack of pious activities. You know, in such a yuga, everything becomes very strong and fragrant and flavorful again.
Yeah, so I guess if I'm thinking about a person behind things, so in other words, we're thinking we are doing this or that, but is it really the demigods who are seeing us doing this and that, and they're thinking, okay, they don't deserve, you know, I mean, you know, they're not acting properly, and therefore we're going to hold back from the taste or the smell or whatever, and different. I guess
that could be, I think, an appropriate way to think. That sounds correct to me. And so we know that if we do sacrifices, which by serving Krishna through our sacrifice of Sankirtan sacrifice, that satisfies all the demigods also. And that's a way to reinvigorate and rejuvenate the life in the world around us, and counteract some of the deadening quality of Kali Yuga, which tries to make everything into a desert of no sensual experience or anything like that. You know, it's said that deserts on earth are places that are punished by because of sinful activities. It says that in Srila Prabhupada's books. You know, that the places that are pious have beautiful ponds and swans and lotus flowers and nice things to offer to Krishna. So, further discussion, or should it? I was thinking, Madhumati the other day was going to ask a question about the worship of the universal form and never got to ask it, but Srila Prabhupada had mentioned that the worship of the universal form and the worship of deities were for neophytes in the purport, and so her question was about that, and we were discussing that a little afterwards, because of course worship of deities is a very important part of our sadhana in Iskcon, and we expect the advanced devotees also to be worshipping deities. But the very advanced devotees, they see Krishna everywhere, so they don't only see Krishna in the deities. The neophytes only see Krishna in the deities. The advanced devotees can see Krishna everywhere. And I think in the same way, we shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed to meditate on the universal form when we're out, you know, taking a japa walk and you know, by some natural, you know, by an ocean or something like that, and we can see, oh, this great ocean is a vast expanse of some part of Krishna's gigantic body as the universal form. As long as we really understand that this material universe is being created and destroyed, and it's being a manifestation of Krishna's external energy, And then there's a transcendental spiritual world of Krishna's internal energy where he displays his eternal, beautiful, unchanging forms, four-armed forms, and his beautiful two-armed form is Krishna who plays a flute. So it's, yes, please. It's early now, so let's have some more discussion. It's rare that I stop early instead of running on.
So when it mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that everybody is worshipping me in one sense, directly or indirectly. So from hearing from you today, I'm thinking that what it may mean that, for example, people worship sun and nature and everything, and we may worship, but we have the full understanding that this is actually Krishna's universal form, but people may just worship the sun and moon and like that. So is that what it means when they don't have full knowledge, but they're worshiping the sun and the moon, that they're worshiping Krishna indirectly? Is that what that statement means?
Yes, so, I mean, you may be speaking of different statements. One is, ye yatamang prapadyante tangstatayvajamiham mama vartmanu vartante manushyang partha sarvasha. Everybody follows my path in all respects. We should understand that verse. I know I'll get to the 9th chapter, which is probably what you're referring to. But you know, Mayavadis sometimes say, well, everyone follows Krishna, so whatever path you choose will take you there, or something like that. We reject that, right? As many minds, there are that many paths, one Mayavadi has said. And of course, no, there are specific paths that are chalked out by great authorities, and we should follow those if we really want to get to Krishna. But where else can we go but to Krishna and his external feature? In that way, as you surrender to him, he rewards them. So those who don't want to know Krishna or want to ignore Krishna, he rewards them by letting them completely forget Krishna. They may even go to subterranean heavenly planets where they have very strong sense enjoyment for a long time and they never think of Krishna. And that's hellish to a devotee. So you're talking about, I believe, where Krishna says that ye twanya devata bhaktya yajante shraddhayanvata tepi mameva kaunteya yajantya vidhi purvakam. That if you're worshipping demigods, that you're really worshipping me, but not according to the proper rules, not in a wrong way. Avidhi purvakam means you're breaking the vidhis, you know, because to worship Krishna, to worship the demigods properly, you have to understand that Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary of the sacrifice. So yes, in the 10th chapter then, Krishna begins to explain to Arjuna, when he asks him, how should I think of you in this world? Krishna starts showing that everything that's opulent and powerful and beautiful and awe-inspiring, the greatest of every category of that is actually Krishna's vibhuti manifestation. So people naturally will worship the sun or moon, maybe without understanding that it's Krishna, just because they see that something powerful or beautiful or glorious. But higher than that is to understand that the actual Supreme Personality of Godhead, to really understand that in truth. So that's why Krishna says, Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha ye tu mam abhijanati tattve natas javantite. That I am the enjoyer of all the sacrifices and the master of all the sacrifices. But if you don't know my tattva, if you don't know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you fall down. And then he says that yanti deva vrta devan pitrin yanti pitra vrta. So if you worship Krishna, you come to Krishna and you get out of the material samsara and you get to actually experience the highest bliss. And but if you worship different demigods without paying attention to Krishna, then you fall down. So in the 7th chapter, Krishna is saying people worship these demigods because they want material desires fulfilled by demigods. They see them as, oh, I'm going to an order supplier, and I'm going to do some business. I'll give you this and you give me that. And that way they get something that's limited and temporary and is not going to completely satisfy the soul's real need for pure devotional service, bhakti or hokshaja. But they don't understand that even the faith that they have with which they worship the demigod, that they're able to keep the vrat, correctly and be able to get the result, is coming from Krishna, and certainly the result is coming from Krishna also. Where's the demigod getting it from? Or Srila Prabhupada used to say that in the Soviet Union, the atheistic communists would tell people, they would try to break people of Christianity by telling them, pray for the bread, pray for bread, and you still don't get anything to eat. And they say, now pray to us, the party, the Communist Party, and then we'll give you the bread. So this is where it's really coming from. And Prabhupada said, well, where are you getting the bread from, rascal? Because they also have to depend on rain from the demigods in order to grow the bread. So, and the demigods, so Krishna says that you have to perform sacrifice, you have to recognize that there's a superior power. This is an essential recognition of us, therefore we have to perform sacrifice. And the ultimate sacrifice is the sacrifice in full knowledge of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seeing all living entities and all others as his parts and parcels, even all the adibhotic, all the material ingredients of creation, all our personal as the perceptive self receivers, and also all the higher controllers. It's all ultimately coming from Krishna and is all ultimately Krishna. If we can see this properly, we can completely surrender and take full shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. So this description of creation is very useful to help us understand how everything is Krishna, all related to Krishna, coming from Krishna. Something else? I don't want to stop early. Okay, go ahead.
Well, that's an interesting point about how, so some countries were consciously made like, not to believe in God, like the communist countries. So they were atheistic, like the Soviet Union, for example. Some were like communist, but they also had churches. But the Soviet Union was completely like, they were forbidden to worship God at all. And so, yeah, it would seem like they would have those shortages, which is, it seems like it's coming from the government, but it's really coming from lack of worship.
Yeah, maybe, well, there were social systems in place that were oppressive to people in the lower classes, and people identified those social systems with the religion. Like, for example, in Spain, I don't want to make this a class about, mundane history of the 20th century or something, but the church had been identified with the aristocracy, the Inquisition and everything. Then the anarchists of the left, Popular Front type governments have become associated with anti-clericalism. Also, in Mexico, they were killing priests in the 30s, and in the Napoleonic, the French Revolution.
Places,
Robespierre had this
ideals, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They had this because they were thinking that this religion is holding people down. The Marxists also, said that religion is the opiate of the masses or something, because it does. Actually, we are able to, by being tolerant, we're able to accept. Sometimes we have to be careful of that too, that even as devotees, if we're tolerant and humble, we might let somebody take advantage of us. Some big leader, starts ordering us and bossing us around, and they might be enjoying being the controller, and we might be enjoying being a humble, and it's the person who takes the humble position is better. In the 4th canto, I think there's a place where Prithu Maharaj, I believe, if not the four Kumars, but I believe it's Prithu Maharaj is saying that actually Shudras are the most fortunate because they're always in this humble position. And therefore that, if you get power, there's always an opportunity to misuse it. If you get power and riches and things like that. But in the, I guess the ideal was to try to make a society that was equal and everything, but when Stalin practiced this collectivization and making everybody work on collective farms, and those peasants who would be, the Communist Party was supposed to be the party of peasants and workers, but the peasants who would become successful, the kulaks, who were good farmers and had successful farms, then they became
the
seen
churches were very corrupt.
They became seen as a class, as an enemy class, and they starved. There was actually, in the 20th century, in the 1930s, there was millions of people died from this failed idea that they couldn't produce enough grains when they had collective farms, and they blamed the small farmers and starved them, especially in the Ukraine, starved millions of people on purpose, even took all the grains from them, so they had nothing to eat. Anyway, I'm getting into mundane history too much, but yeah, churches can be corrupt. Corruption can be anywhere, even, so we have to search our hearts and be introspective constantly and be ready to, devotees should stand up for themselves too if they need to, they shouldn't be taken advantage of by their sweet, humble natures. They should be careful to get what they need. We have to take care of our own health. We have to take care of our mental health. You should always be meek and humble, but don't be anybody's punching bag. It's not necessary for devotional service. Anything else? Sorry to deviate from into the mundane history so much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Everybody goes late.
I thought it goes till 9.
No, that's, you are misinformed. It's actually